This is Pace Per Mile. For more on the latest news, reviews, check out pacepermile.com. Like us on Facebook and join in the conversation on Twitter. With host Chris Nicholas, this is Pace Per Mile.
Welcome to Pace Per Mile. I'm Chris Nicholas. This week's show, we have two individuals on. From a race director standpoint, we're going to find out about what races are looking at when they're putting together their medals. We all run races, and we love to get the shirt, post-race food, obviously make sure that the courses are measured properly and to the right distance. But this week, we are going to talk exclusively about medals and something you probably have heard about, the Top 25, and it's brought to us by Marathon and Beyond. They've been doing it for a few years now, and we're going to really dive into not only this year's Top 25, but we're going to kind of go back in history a little bit and see how the changes have come to more of a competition level. Paul Gentry. Paul, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Chris. Thank you for having me on.
And Cara Esau. Cara has been with Marathon and Beyond for a couple of years. Paul, you've been obviously with Marathon and Beyond a little bit longer than that, but you've passed the torch to Cara. And Cara, we'd like to welcome you to Pace Per Mile as well.
Thank you, Chris. I'm glad to be here.
Take us back a little bit. A former editor for Runner's World decided just to start a new magazine. Is that how the foundation came from Marathon and Beyond?
Well, I believe that Jan Seeley, the publisher, and Rich Benio got together and decided to create a new magazine, the Reader's Digest of long running in my eyes. So they've been going since 1997, and they do a great job.
When somebody looks at a copy of Marathon and Beyond, we're talking hundreds of pages in a publication. It's bi-monthly. And also, it isn't all the fluff that we see in a lot of publications out there about race shoes and how to train for a 5K or a 10K. We're really talking about marathons when we look at a copy of Marathon and Beyond.
I love how the human interest element of it, hearing about people's races and these really well-known runners with names that everybody recognizes. These are the people who are writing their race experiences, and it's really very inspirational. And you're right, it's not so much delving into the shave off some time off of your 5K or what exercises build up your glutes the best. It's not that kind of a magazine because, of course, that's pretty well covered elsewhere.
I read somewhere where somebody said it's not the 500 to 1,500 word articles. Some of the stories could last 10 to 20 pages.
Well, yeah, generally, Cara and my articles are 3,000 words each. So it takes quite a long time to develop the story and write it because they want to really go in depth because they're very efficient and, the best magazine out there in my eyes.
And Paul, you got a race medal. You remember that race, and you decided maybe I should compare race medals with other medals across the country. Take us back as we now try to dive into the top 25. Marathon and Beyond puts out a top 25 of the race medals on an annual basis. They develop a panel. We'll talk a little bit about that here in the next few minutes because some of the names on the panel are incredible, and they change regularly as well. We want to touch on that. But Paul, how did the top 25, how did it start way back in 2002 from just an idea?
Well, I finished the race in 2002, and I had no idea. Like most runners, you're out there running a marathon because you want to do it. You want to accomplish something. So when you get done, I had a medal that I was disappointed in. I thought, I just ran 26.2 miles, and this could have came out of a trophy shop. Do I really want to display this? And I thought, what if this was my first marathon? And fortunately, it wasn't. My first was Big Sur. I thought, you know what? I need to write a book and let every marathon person that runs marathons and every runner know what the medals look like, so they don't make the same mistake I just did. That was 2002, and putting a book out didn't make a whole lot of sense, obviously, because it would within 6 months it'd be outdated. So I waited till I was done with the Navy in 1997 and developed a website, 262medals.com, where I could put everything up and start the process. And then I contacted Marathon and Beyond and Rich Benio with my idea on starting a panel across the United States from each region to go ahead and vote. And also the website was there for runners to see what they're going to get before they run it.
So from your first medal, you decided, I'm going to start this kind of comparison tool, which eventually turned into something where races are actually competing against each other, not only for runners and runner numbers, but also for the best of the best when it comes to medals, and comparing that from when you got that sort of bad medal, the one that you didn't really like, to today. Have you seen that medals have improved because of the rating of the top 25 medals?
Absolutely. They've definitely improved. And it's a friendly competition. And really, everybody has a sense of community. And they definitely want that to shine. And they're proud of it. When a volunteer puts that medal around your neck, they have the same sense of community. And each marathon wants to display that. But they also want to be original, too. And because they want the runners to be proud of what they get. Just in the last 4 years, we've seen so many better medals out there. And marathons that were giving average medals are now putting great ones out, because there's a lot of medal chasers out there right now.
It's true, Chris. It's funny because sometimes I get to see the emails that people send to Paul or to Marathon and beyond, the race directors, and they're sending pictures of their medals or descriptions. And it's really cute because it's almost like they're taking their child to some kind of a beauty pageant, and this is a beauty pageant for the medals. They're very proud of their medals, and they're really working to be in the top 25, or a lot of them are really aiming for that number one slot. So it has truly completely changed the attitude toward medals.
And without singling anybody out, because we don't want to do that during our interview today, we'll talk about some of the highlights and some of the great medals, but we won't really bash any races and talk about any bad medals. But I remember as a young race director, and I will admit this, is that I had one of those bad years where we took a medal or purchased from a medal company the sticker medals. And we all have seen those. And I'll tell you, I exactly, you know where I'm going at on this, is that you could not only see the disappointment, but you could feel it. And at that point, you just say, never again. And I think you probably see that when it comes to race medals and how races have developed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes people go and give alternative things. You know, we've seen rocks, we've seen railroad ties, you know, they're pretty cool, or maybe race jackets, or, you know, something unique. But then again, you got to realize that it's like the Olympic tradition. You want a medal. I mean, it's just part of it. When you finish a marathon, you want Frank Shorter got. You know, it won't be near as good, of course. It isn't a gold medal, but you have that same sense of pride and accomplishment. So you want a medal. So race directors that give extra bling, that's fine, but I'd never replace a medal with something like a jacket.
Will it probably eventually replace the medal? Could you see that happening?
No way. I mean, for instance, Bob Dolphin, he finished a marathon and didn't get a medal. He got a really nice jacket, and he's run 500 marathons. I mean, he's got so many medals, he's got a room full of it. But he said, you know what? I didn't want a jacket. I wanted a medal. That's the kind of attitude that I think is never going to change.
And Cara, do you see that as well? You've obviously run a fair number of races in your career. You're a certified running coach, so you're dealing with runners that are probably beginners up to the advanced level and running their marathons and scheduling out their races on an annual basis. Do you see that expectation is there among the runners that are just coming in?
I say it consistently. I hear people tell me that they want their medal to be a reflection of the effort that they put into that race. And of course, anyone who has run a marathon knows it's a lot of effort and a lot of pain and sacrifice. So the medal is a way to commemorate that.
2 days ago, we posted on our Facebook page, and we asked the question, what's, other than obviously the race, what's the most important part of the race that you would want to take away from it? Would it be the post-race? Would it be the swag? Would it be the race medal? And by far, it was race medal. We have a lot of marathon maniacs out there, you know, that are tied in with the program. Mm-hmm. Paul, you are a marathon maniac. Can you ever get too many medals? I mean, you just mentioned a moment ago of having a room full of medals, but we get our medal and we throw it in a box or hang it on a wall and we kind of forget about it.
I don't think we could ever get enough medals. I mean, now they're making Marathon Maniac medal hangers. And I've seen pictures of maniacs that had like an entire 15-foot wall just full of medals all the way across, right in order. I could imagine that any Marathon Maniac, when he isn't running, would probably walk up and look at those medals and think about the relationships that they've had and how this one was hard or this one was easy or this one was hot. Some people throw it in a box. It isn't as big a deal, but odds are, if you're a maniac, you've got it displayed somewhere.
Somebody will build a house one day of race medals. I could see it. I will see a marathon.
For Christmas one year, my husband got me a shadow box, and he filled it with the medals that I had up until that point, and I have it hung right there at my front door. So whenever people are leaving the house, they see my medals there, and it's always a great way to have one last conversation with people before they leave the house.
It shows a true runner. There's no doubt about that. The top 25 developed. Paul, you came up with this idea, decided to, instead of putting in a book, because obviously that would be outdated, decided to connect with Marathon and Beyond. And since 2009 have been publishing this article of the top 25. Has there been one race that has stuck out over those years since 2009 that has, you probably know this one, has been on the list every year?
About 5 or 6. There's, of course, Portland, who won this year, just a magnificent organization. They've been on every year. Route 66, they just year in and year out, they have a different design, and they're always on it. Hartford has been on it every year, and so is the Flying Pig board. Surf City. There's been a few. There's one that's been on 3 times, and I forgot what they're. Maybe you could help me with that. It was in your article, Cara. They've only been around 3 years, and they were on all three times. Do you remember the one from Florida?
Yes, Running for the Bay. That is what it's called.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of different marathons that have been in 3 of the 4 years too. Quite a few, like 11. So they're consistently good, but we do have different ones come in every year, and then some drop out.
I think it's important for the listeners to understand, and I want Cara to kind of dive into this area, is that the panel that is developed each year to judge these medals are not the same. In fact, they change every year, and there might be a couple of mainstays here and there, but tell us a little bit about the panel that is developed that takes on the task of going through all of these medals.
Yes, it's a huge endeavor. So we started very early, long before the article is due. There are 11 regions throughout the country, includes Canada. We never want to repeat a panelist. And we want it to be 50-50 as far as men and women. So we also want to have not just really experienced runners, not just the marathon maniacs, but not only new marathoners either. So it's just this tremendous blend that we try to get. And it's difficult because, of course, we don't know people all across the country and Canada. So we go through and we each contact the people we know. I have a lot of connections in Virginia and New York, and places like that. So we'll kind of go through, and if it's someone who I used before, then of course I can't use them again, but I might explore who they know and get some references that way. Running group, that's a good source. So I'll look through if we're missing people in one particular region. I might look up some of the running groups in that area. Paul and I are sponsored by Brooks, and so that's one source we can look through our Brooks people. And of course, I, as a running coach too, there are a lot of other running coaches throughout the country that I would have the email addresses from, so I can contact all of them. But it does take months to compile that, and especially to keep it even with the men and the women and 2 people from each region, and trying to keep a blend of experienced runners and newer runners.
And you've had names, Doug Curtis, and you had Marshall Ulrich on. You've had Mark Payne. What are some of the others that you have had on this panel?
We've had Dick Beardsley. Gosh, yeah, we've had notables. We try to get one each time. You'd be surprised. Marshall Ulrich, for instance, he graduated college with an art degree. So he brought a lot of good comments about the artisticness of the medals and so forth. So he definitely, just because he can run across the United States doesn't mean he doesn't have a good eye.
That's one thing I love about the running community is you can take these running celebrities, and when you meet them in person, they never have that, the arrogant type of way about them. They're very approachable, and yeah, as you say, Paul, Marshall was he gave me so much feedback about his favorite medals and such great insight. So he didn't seem to think that he was above anything. He's just a very down-to-earth and gracious person.
Also for the fans, I think it's important for them to know that it doesn't matter if the race is a big race either. I mean, obviously, Marine Corps Marathon, that's a great medal, but it doesn't mean that they make the list just because they're the Marine Corps Marathon, right?
Definitely. Marine Corps, they won. They won the initial year in 2009, and they've been runner-up the last 2 years. The reason they're picked every year is they just have a great medal. They know what they're doing, and people have a sense of pride, and there's nothing better than the Marine sense of pride. But they're little races. Tupelo, for instance, they've been in the top 25 twice. They're a skull and crossbones. And I think they have less than 200 runners, but yet they make sure that they develop a good medal for the finishers because they're very proud. And people go there for that medal. And even though I think the race might even be capped, you don't have to be, Marine Corps, et cetera, to have pride, of course. And across the nation, we can name so many small organizations that have done a great job on their medals.
Cara, you have probably a medal that stands out for you over the past couple of years that you've really liked.
Okay, so from a biased perspective, I love Portland because I've met with Les Smith and he's just brilliant. And I love talking with him and hearing what he has put into it. So, of course, I love Portland, but I won't say that one because I'm too biased. So I really love the Fort Lauderdale, A1A. Mm-hmm. It's year to year, it's just really impressive and creative. I really love them. Well, especially it was last year's that they had in it. It was a turtle that opened up, so kind of like, it was almost like a locket is what it reminded me of. I thought that was very clever. And then their design is always really good. So that one comes in high each time. And I think, as Paul said, it's a seahorse this year, if that's not confidential. Yeah. I'm really excited about that seahorse.
And they won 2 or 3 years ago with the opening clam. They not only won, they wiped out everybody because they were very innovative. Nobody had ever opened up a medal. It doubled the whole design. It was a brilliant idea. So simple, just put a hinge on a medal. But
that's right. I remember that clam because I had forgotten, but at that time I was not writing the article with Paul. I was on the panel that year. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think that was my first or second choice was that clam. I loved it. And then the following year when I wrote it, they had the turtle, which I also loved.
They had a pair of sandals, I think, right? This past year.
Yeah, they did. They decided to change things up. I think they asked on Facebook, they asked their runners, hey, what are you looking for? And they went with that. So they didn't use the hinge one year. And they dropped from, I think they were number 3 the year after they were number 1. Then they were number 3, and then they just dropped down a little bit. But you know what? They're still in the top 25.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think the seahorse is going to do well, too, odds are.
And there's a lot of marathons throughout the country.
I love how they stick with that beachy kind of a theme. The clam, the turtle, the seahorse, the flip-flops. It really just... for me, it really is appealing. It makes me want to just take a vacation somewhere beachy.
Nice description. Cara, let's talk. You mentioned a moment ago about Portland, and I think that's a story in itself. When I read this story, especially how the race director pulled out a box of medals and had a story for each medal when you met with him, I think that's kind of incredible, and I think that tells a little bit, if you can kind of go into it, our listeners, how much a race director probably has input into the race medal, but also how they're kind of looking out for the history of the event as well, building that chapter each year of that book, of that marathon. Take us back to when you met with the race director of Portland and how that discussion went.
Well, when I met with Les, it was actually for a different article that I was writing about the Portland Marathon. So I had gathered a lot of history about that marathon specifically. Les is quite a historian. He is an attorney, but he is fascinated with history. And when you sit down with him, if you open up any conversation, he immediately launches into the history of any topic that you bring up. He's amazing. With these medals, he'll take out one medal at a time. I think that we were with him, because Paul was with me also. I think we were there for probably 2 hours. And individually, he showed us each marathon that medal that he had saved through these years. As I mentioned in the article, it was encased in lucite. He really took care of each one. And each detail on the medal, he was telling me about how he came up with that and what that represented. And it was just amazing how much thought he put into each one. So, yeah, he is, at least for Les Smith, he really personally designs each one. And, of course, he gets some feedback from the different people around him, but he is the one who makes those decisions.
And just for our listeners, when they see the picture of this medal, they actually have to look at both sides of the medal, because there's a medal that's two-sided, has a rose on one side. What's the tie-in with Portland again, with the rose side of the medal?
Portland is known as the City of Roses. That's our nickname. Portland is just the perfect climate to grow roses. They're all over the place, and it's beautiful. So it does represent our city.
And with his race, every participant that crosses the finish line gets a rose. So there's that additional tie-in, as well as a medal. And on the flip side of that medal is, in just looking at it, and when you get a medal, a race medal, usually you look at it for, a few seconds. But when you look at the Portland medal, at least from what I've seen, is that you have to really look at it. Is that kind of why it made the top 25 and won the top 25 this year?
Oh, yes, I definitely agree. It's very artistic, and it's not, some of the medals might be a little flashy, or they're, colorful and kind of artsy, but Portland is artistic and very just classy. It really looks like something that, it looks very valuable.
And you had mentioned a moment ago, A1A, they told you that they're going to put a seahorse on their medal this coming year. Is that correct? This next year?
It's already out. It ran in February, so it's actually, the finishers have it in their hands now. It's a great medal. It opens up.
And with these races, do they tell you in advance, this is the medal we're going to do this coming year, when you're talking to them about the article?
I kind of find out ahead of time, which is kind of nice. But a lot of marathons, for instance, Cara wrote about one, Atlantic City. They literally unveil it. Marathons do that. Portland is going to be doing that soon. And then, and it brings runners in once they look at the design. Generally, the design is a computer graphic at first, because it isn't manufactured yet in China or wherever they have it manufactured. Mm-hmm. So they have an idea of what it's going to be, but it ends up pretty close, the final product.
Without seeing any of the races' names, Paul, have you seen particular races? Could you identify, and again, staying away from names, could you identify races that have really said, I want to make the top 25, we're going to make the top 25, and we're going to change our medal drastically? Have you seen that over the past few years?
Absolutely. I saw it this year. I had two different running directors contact me and say, look, we're aiming to do this. We want to get on your list. I won't name them, but they did it. They pulled it off. They could dramatically change their medal to try and make the top 25. But then again, everybody gains. It isn't just, this is an article that comes out every May, and it's a gauge. But the reason they do it, of course, is for the runners. But yes, they did one on the list, and it's free promotion. I mean, you throw it up on your website. I went to an expo in Newport. They had the number 3 medal. They were on the cover. They had a big blown up cover right there at the expo. They're very proud of their medals.
And we hope that there's no runners out there that are looking at the top 25 and saying, I'm just going to run those top 25 because they're the best of the best medals. Obviously, they're going to judge. They're going to judge the race.
We're not that shallow, but we do like the bling.
I do have runners, though, say that they certainly do choose marathons because of the medal.
And that's very important, because I think we have all seen somebody say this, or write it down or say it in person. I'm not running the race because of the medal. But I'll tell you, they're running the race because of the medal. I mean, you wanna finish.
Well, they have to run some race, so they might as well run one that has a great medal.
Exactly. So you can't just say you're not running the race because of the medal. And I think that's what we've seen. Where is the future of the top 25? Are we going to continue to see medals being developed to do different things, open bottles, as we've seen this past year, the top 25 and in past years. Obviously, the clam, obviously an incredible medal design there. What are we going to see in the future? Is there anything that you can kind of predict that races are going to put into their medal designs? Have you heard anything out there that we might see on the top 25?
I don't see why it won't continue to be original, because in the United States, we're very original here. We're the most creative country in the world, in my eyes. I've had ideas. I mean, for goodness sakes, you could actually develop medals that have sand in it from the beach, for instance. Like Surf City, they could throw sand in their surfboard. Then the runner go away with a part of their community actually in their hands, or maybe a river, for instance. You could get some sort of globe kind of medal where you're actually leaving with part of the river. So, I don't know how it wouldn't evaporate eventually or something, but I mean, that's just right off the top of my head. There's so many different things that you could do, but you also have to, of course, keep in mind manufacturing costs and so forth. I mean, let's say you get the metal made overseas. How are you gonna get all that sand over there? So unfortunately, you can come up with a great idea, but there's logistics.
And do you see that that's the one thing that prevents a race from really going all out, especially some of the smaller races out there? Obviously, we have seen some of the smaller races make the top 25, but the more we do, the more elaborate the medal is. The medal company is going to come back and say, that's going to cost you a couple bucks more. It's going to cost you, to that millimeter or two thicker. It's going to cost you. Is that the biggest thing preventing races from really going all out?
Well, it's definitely a factor, because they have to get the money from either corporate sponsors or up the price a little bit. But if you think about it, I mean, there's cheap races, and then for instance, if you run rock and roll, you're gonna drop probably $150 and so forth. What's another $5 to get a great medal? I think runners, it definitely, if you could get something really unique, I think runners would throw an extra $5 down, because they're invested already with all the months of training. So $5 is a latte.
And what about bringing that runner back? Is that the biggest factor when somebody puts out a race medal, when that race unveils their medal? Is it we're putting that medal out so that we do the wow effect this year and they're back next year?
That question did make me think of Cowtown. I mean, it's not exactly an answer to your question, but Cowtown, well, they give you a plaque and you get a medal, but if you keep running it, then in, 5 years, I think, you'll complete the plaque.
I have one, Space Coast. Space Coast was number 4 the last 2 years, so they've been pretty consistent, but they're coming out with a series starting this year, different shuttle, like the Challenger, and if you go to their website, you can see the different medals that they're going to have. So I think that's going to intrigue people and bring them in, because, you want the Challenger, and you're like, well, I'll go next year because, I want the Intrepid, or that's a unique idea. So I commend them for that.
Well, Cara and Paul, I'd love for you to grab your list of the top 25. This is published online that people can access without having to get Marathon and Beyond. Is that the one article that is open to the public without having to actually grab the publication?
It has been 3 out of the 4 years. Cara and I now do 2 articles instead of 1, but you can read 3 of the 4 online.
And Cara, let's start with 25. There was a 3-way tie there, right?
Yes, that's right. I think that's the first time that's happened.
And you had Wisconsin, Atlantic City, and Tacoma City. The 3 races have showed up on the top 25 before, Paul?
Tacoma City's been in 3 times. Wisconsin and Atlantic City, it was their first year that they've gotten to the top 25, so good on them.
And then 24, 23, and 22 was Heritage Trail, the Cowtown that we talked about just a few moments ago, and then First Light. I really liked Heritage Trail, but I was kind of concerned as well. Heritage Trail is a wooden medal, and I've seen things go both ways out there in runner comments. They cross the finish line, they've got a wooden medal, and some think the race is cheap. But then there's the creative side of it that, hey, it's a wooden medal. It's not the normal item that we get when we cross the finish line. What's your viewpoint on that, Cara?
All the feedback I heard on it was very positive. I think that people felt like because it was wood, it reflected the race itself very well. Usually it comes down to that. People love medals that reflect the character of the race itself.
Most definitely. 21, 20, and 19. Running for the Bay, Missoula, and then Chicago. Is that a medal that makes the top 25 partly because it's Chicago or because it's just, I think the comment was it's a very clean medal. Paul, what's your viewpoint on that particular medal?
It's very clean, but this is the first year they've made it. I believe the manufacturer and them decided to change it a little bit, and it looks a little more like New York City skyline. Well, it's of course Chicago, but it just stands out the way they did the medal. New York City has done that before, where the skyline really sticks out well. And I just think they did a really good job this year. And they're not voted in. If you look at the top 25, Boston's only made it once. Mm-hmm. They're honorable mention every year. So people don't just use the status of a race to pick their favorite medals out. They look at the originality mainly. And Chicago did have a nice clean medal, and I would imagine they'll probably make it again.
And when you look at all the medals together, just one after another, you see all of this unique style in each one of the medals, and that's pretty incredible. I think the comment for number 17 was the Mississippi Blues. Obviously, 18 was St. George, and then the Mississippi Blues Marathon, and then Detroit hit 16. But number 17 was a record. Well, not a record, but it looked like a record in a sense, and that was a really neat medal that I saw on the list. Cara, what's your opinion of that one?
Oh, yeah, I love it. Again, I love, as I said earlier, how it reflects the race. It's the musical instrument, the guitar, and with it being the blues marathon, Mississippi Blues, it just reflects the theme of it so well. But yeah, and Lisa, who gave a comment on that one, she also loves it. It was the record, and and she loved it on that guitar. It's a little hard to tell in the picture, but it's kind of colorful and it's glittery, and she likes that too.
15 with Park City, then A1A, top of Utah. They had a moose in their medal this past year. And then the Surf City, and I really do like the surfboard. I think that's really cool to do that. They don't do a surfboard every year, or is it a different kind of style of it?
No, they do a surfboard every year. They've been number 2 before, so people really love their medal. I believe they've only done it just the 4 years. They just started the surfboards at the exact time that we did the articles. So yeah, they make it every year, and they're always very popular, and people love to go there anyway to definitely hit Huntington Beach, etc. down there.
It's a very neat medal. Wine glass made 11. I'll and stop me anywhere here if one comes out to you. But wine glass at 11, Miami at 10, Disney made 9, and the Big Sur at 8. Obviously, some major marathons in there. Any one of those really stand out for you?
Of course, the glass ones do. Wine glass. I mean, the cover has 3 glass medals, and people love glass medals because they're beautiful. They, you put them up, they're sparkly on your porch, and they grab your attention. And so, and not only that, it's generally made in the community. So it's a community effort to do a glass medal. You don't have to ship it overseas, and so a lot is put into it. So those always stand out for me. And of course, Big Sur. I mean, they make theirs out of clay, and an amazing process that they go through, and they'll never change their medals. It's definite beautiful medal.
Yeah, I love Big Sur too, how it's kind of rustic with it being clay, and then also the strings are, they're not ribbon like most medals are. They're actually like leather, rawhide. So I think that's really cool.
And then 7, 6, 5, and 4. Hartford, the Flying Pig with its 2-sided medal. the front of the pig on the one side and the back of the pig on the other side. Route 66 and the Space Coast, which I love the spaceship idea to go through there. And then finally, the top 3, Newport, Marathon, and then Portland. Why do you think Newport Marathon, we talked a little bit about why the Marine Corps made that, but why do you think Newport was in the top 3, Paul?
Well, again, it's what I was saying about wine glass. It's just a gorgeous medal. It looks like a big lollipop, and I have it hanging on my car mirror. I mean, I've gone the last 3 years because I think they have a great medal, and I've run their marathon, and I'm fairly close. They were number 7 last year, and they're a little marathon. So you don't have to have a lot of money to put out a great medal, and they even recycle the glass and make glass floats the following year from the medals that they don't give out. So it's a community effort, and for them to be number 3 is to me, it's amazing.
There's probably a story behind every one of these medals that make the top 25. There has to be, from Portland to Surf City to A1A and on down the list. And we could probably go for hours, but I think there's probably the race directors that are listening to this interview and they're wondering how they get in. And I think as a race director myself, I have thought about that many times. It's like, how do I do that? But for those race directors that are out there that have not picked up their latest edition of Marathon and Beyond, how do they submit their medals? How do they connect with Cara and yourself?
Well, it's really simple. You just send an email to medals@marathonandbeyond.com. Just the marathon medals only, not the halves or the 5Ks, etc. As long as you're original. Route 66, for instance, they won one year. They take months and months developing medals. They think about it. They go, what should we do to make things different? What would runners like? They ask their runners on Facebook, etc. All you need to do is just ask your runners what they're looking for, and then just be original, and everybody gains.
The publication itself, is there a couple of articles that come to mind that people should get their copy for to read this month? Other than your article, Paul, we didn't really touch on that too much, but you wrote a really nice piece about bringing it back to the good old USA when it comes to producing medals as well.
There was one article that I loved called My Most Unforgettable Marathon by Lois Berkowitz. It's just one of the, as I said earlier, Marathon and Beyond has lots of cool human interest stories as far as the experiences other runners have had in their races. And I love this one because I, too, with every single marathon I've done, I've learned some lessons. And I feel like my kids probably get so sick of me drawing life applications from races. But the truth is, any runner can, would agree that we learn so much about life and about how to deal with our problems through the races that we run. It's lots of great applications to life. So that article is just something I could identify with.
And the articles are really, and the writers they really are passionate when they're putting together their articles. I think Paul and I had chatted when I was running across the U.S., I think Paul was messaging me, ever so a couple of times a month. Hey, I'm still working on this detail and that detail and making sure that he got it right. And I could see that in everybody who writes for Marathon and Beyond. So Rich and Jan have put together a phenomenal publication. We encourage the listeners they can get Marathon and Beyond by going to the website, subscribing, right? Paul, tell us a little bit about the process of getting their own copy of Marathon and Beyond.
Again, it's really simple. Just write Jan at marathonandbeyond.com and she'll get right in touch with you. You can, of course, get the printed copy, but they also have the digital copy, which I use. I download it into my Kindle Fire. So when I'm on the treadmill, I'm reading their magazine each 2 months. Excellent. So it's a great publication.
And what's the next marathon for you, Paul, as we wrap up? You're racing out there, too. You're a marathon maniac, so something's on your calendar.
I'm going to run Rock and Roll Seattle probably here in about 10 days. That'd be number 49, and I'm setting myself up for Portland, number 50. So I have a pretty good feeling I'm going to get a good medal there. So I thought, that's a good one for number 50.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And Cara, what about you? You're training athletes, but you're probably towing the line as well out there, right?
I do have some races for my clients coming up here, some athletes, but I don't have anything on the agenda right now for me.
I'm sure Paul will be sending you some suggestions any moment now.
Yes, I know. It's true.
We tend to lead busy lives, but we commend you for getting other athletes out there and running. Paul Gentry, thanks for joining us on Pace Per Mile this week. The website for Marathon and Beyond, pretty simple. Tell us, though, for the listeners to go to their computers and go on right now.
marathonandbeyond.com.
Very simple. Cara, the top 25, you're doing it now with a little bit of guidance from Paul. You've got the reins, probably reaching out to race directors already for next year's articles. Again, they can send an email in, right?
Yep, that's right.
This will be up for race directors and as well, obviously the vast majority of our listeners are runners. Put a post on your local Facebook page for that race that you really like and say, hey, you know what? Give me a good medal. I think that would be important so that it makes the top 25 next year. Thanks for joining us, Paul and Cara, and we'd love to connect with you in the future if you're willing to come back on the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Chris. I enjoyed talking to you.
At Pace Per Mile, we want to share your story. Do you know someone that has a compelling topic to share with the listeners? Help us tell your story or their story by emailing us today. info@pacepermile.com. That's info@pacepermile.com.